It's episode 2 of the Fins Up Podcast. I'm your host, Chad Martin, and with me in studio today, JC Martin.
What's up, guys?
And not on the phone, actually live and in person with us as well, Miles Moore.
Heyo.
Welcome, guys.
Well, I need to go ahead and snuff out the elephant that's in the room already. We're 37 seconds into the podcast, and I've already stumbled over my words, so I think this one might be a rough episode here.
I think it'll be fine. It doesn't even matter if you stumble over it or not. That's what Ole Miss's opponents are going to be doing this year anyway, is stumbling over Ole Miss, so I think that's going to be perfect. Oh, this whole show is going to be trash talking. Every episode is going to be trash talking. But look, before we get into that, I think we want to take care of a little bit of business right now, and it was tragic, and I think by this point in time, everybody's heard about it. But the tragedy that struck the Ole Miss family and the Oxford community that left 11 children, without their parents this weekend was tragic. And if you haven't heard, that plane that was carrying them was headed back to Oxford from Florida. I believe it was on they were going to a dental conference. Yeah. I couldn't think of conference. And all aboard perished in the accident. And the deceased are Dr. Jason Faris and his wife Leah Faris, and she's a doctor as well. Dr. Michael Perry and his wife Kim, Dr. Austin Poole and his wife Angie. Our thoughts and prayers go with them through the long healing process to come. And here's a little something nice that Ole Miss did, I think, for the children this week. And it was on the news, and some of you guys may have heard about this. And I'll take this quote directly from the rebelgrove.com because they had a great little write-up on it. But as Ole Miss practiced Tuesday morning with a handful of special guests in attendance, now several of the Oxford children who lost both parents in an airplane crash that Sunday morning near Tuscaloosa, Alabama, were at Rebels practice Tuesday. Sarah and John West Perry, Luke Faris, and were among the children who stayed for the entire practice Tuesday. And here's a quote from Hugh Freeze that I really like, and it really just speaks volumes of the kind of person Hugh is. And when he talks, I think you really can feel when Hugh Freeze says something, he really means what he says. To me, he's not the kind of person that doesn't say what he feels. And here's a quote from him. He said, "Man, the hurt I feel for those families. I went home and spent some time with my kids after the news Sunday. I just can't imagine. You search for answers and you're at a total loss for words. I know the Oxford community, though, because I lived here for 5 years now and 3 before. I know that they will rally. I know that we're going to do our part in helping these young kids have a future that's secure. I know the families will, too. We're here to help." Ladies and gentlemen, our thoughts and prayers go with them through this long healing process to come. And you can only hope that they can recover from this tragedy and deal with that. That's such a great loss that I don't think any of us can imagine what that would be like to have to go through something like that. So, guys, our thoughts and prayers are with you and your families and your loved ones at this time. Now, we're going to kick this show off with something. We're going to do the rankings real quick because I pulled this up the other day. Getting ready for this show, I was looking at it because we're still a couple of weeks away from the kickoff to the season.
Right.
All right. So now the SEC put out their power rankings already for the season. These are the preseason rankings, and just to go through the top, let's see. This is 14 teams. So there's going to be 14 rankings, power rankings in the SEC. So here they are. Number 1. Alabama. They're also number 1 in the nation. That's true. LSU is number 2 in power rankings. Your Ole Miss Rebels are number 3.
Yeah!
Tennessee was 4. Florida was 5. Georgia was 6. Then you had Texas A&M, Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State, Vandy, Kentucky, Mizzou, and then South Carolina pulling up the rear for all that whole stuff.
How the mighty have fallen in just a few short years with South Carolina.
And Mizzou, too, at one point was rolling pretty good. But these last couple of years, they've gone downhill. Happy to see.
They were good with their Big 12 players. They lost their Big 12 players. They're not so good anymore.
Yeah, Mississippi State was lucky, it looks like, to crack the top 10 on power rankings. When Dak Prescott left, that program just dropped. So it's going to be interesting. I still think they're trying to fight for their whole QB, so we'll see. It's going to be a really good time going to the Egg Bowl this year. I think it's going to be exciting. But here's the interesting part to me. You have the top 6 teams power ranked in the SEC college football. They're also nationally ranked. But what was really interesting, because I think Alabama was, of course, number 1 nation. LSU's number 6. Ole Miss is number 12.
Too low.
Now,
Too low.
Their SEC power ranking is above Tennessee, but Tennessee is actually ranked number 10.
Well, that's just hot garbage. Tennessee is going to do what they always do. They're going to be overhyped. They're going to wear that offensively bright shade of orange, and then they're going to go out in Knoxville, and they're going to get their rear ends
there you go.
handed to themselves on silver platters.
But here's another one. Florida is ranked number 25 in the nation.
But they're 5th in the SEC power rankings.
Over Georgia, who's number 16.
Nationally.
That's right, nationally. So, there's a big discrepancy right there. Outside of Alabama and LSU, there's a big discrepancy when you start really getting into the national rankings and the SEC power rankings.
I stand by what I said on the last episode. Georgia is the team in the East that everyone needs to be watching. Yes, Jim McElwain did a great job with Florida. The first 8 games of the season last year before they just fell apart. And Tennessee, I'm tired of Tennessee. I'm tired of hearing about Tennessee. I never grew up with having a personal problem with that school and that university. But there comes a point when people talk about you, this is the year that you're going to deliver. This is the year you're going to deliver. This is the year. This is the year. This is your year. It gets to a point where who wants to listen? We've heard this garbage over and over and over again, and yet they get no traction. They get nowhere. Do you have a good quarterback? Absolutely. Second best in the SEC, I would say. Do you have a good running back? Absolutely. They have great defensive ends, great linebackers, but they can't put it together for 60 minutes consistently every single week.
I'm with you, JC, on the kind of wait-and-see game with Tennessee, but I'm kind of that way with LSU, too. I just haven't seen it. They start off hot, they get going, and then they crumble right there at the end because of quarterback play. They're obviously returning with the same quarterback. It's kind of wait and see with them, too. I think 6 is a little bit too high. I know they got a lot of other things playing for him, but until I see him, show out like everybody talks up this big game about him, I just don't see LSU sticking right there in top 10.
And they have him, when they released the all SEC teams, the first, second, and third team, they actually had the quarterback from LSU as the 3rd best in the SEC. And if he's the 3rd best in the SEC, a lot of these SEC schools are going to have a real hard time with the University of Mississippi this year.
Now, was Leonard Fournette, is he still in a boot right now?
He is, and a lot of, I saw an article, I don't want to say a lot of people, I saw a specific article earlier today, it was actually from a Fox Sports analyst, saying that the best thing for Leonard Fournette is to not play another snap of college football.
Increase that draft ranking, make sure it stays
solid.
But
they say that, but look at Todd Gurley. I mean, Todd Gurley is a freak of nature, don't get me wrong, but he blew out ACL twice in college, or blew out an ACL and an Achilles tendon or something like that. That man went 10th overall in the draft, missed the first 3-4 games of the season, came out, still got 1,000 yards.
Todd Gurley is a beast.
Todd Gurley is a monster. So when people say that Leonard Fournette shouldn't play another snap of college football, shut up, sit down, and enjoy the show, because that's what Leonard Fournette's going to do. He's going to run over, he's going to run through people.
And I don't think that's not Leonard Fournette's style from everything I think we've heard of the young man and stuff. He sounds like a great guy, honestly, from everything I've heard about him.
But he's a competitor. He's a competitor. He's not going to sit on the sidelines.
No, he's not. Now, so let me ask you guys this then. JC, if you were doing the power rankings, what would yours look like right there?
Well, not to be biased or anything. No, I'm not gonna do that. Honestly, Alabama is the team to beat. They're the reigning national champions. They deserve that respect.
I agree. I think it would be an injustice. As much as I would like to put Ole Miss number 1, I really think it would be an injustice to say that.
My SEC power rankings would be Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU. Then I'm going Georgia, since I've been singing their praises. I can't backtrack on that now. Georgia, Florida, then Tennessee.
Wow, you're really hating on Tennessee. Fake UT. I can't.
You got talent, Tennessee, but what are you going to do about it? Like, that's cool that you got all these players, but win something. Prove me wrong, please.
And we're talking about Florida beating them 11 straight years.
Exactly. They don't stand a chance.
So Miles, where does that put you in this ranking?
I would go Alabama. I think that's indisputable. I mean, from what we've seen, Saban pulls it together every year. Even if, they do pull, like Ole Miss beating them, 2 years in a row, Alabama has still somehow pulled it out, got their stuff together. I would probably leave LSU right there at number 2, but I just think they're just a tad bit better than Ole Miss at this point. I got to see, Ole Miss losing all our playmakers. I don't know if I could
You want to see how this new crop of guys coming up are going to be. I don't know if I can
for sure put them above LSU right now, but I say Ole Miss right there.
I'll dispute that all day.
And then I'm going to put Florida 4, Tennessee 5.
There you go.
And Georgia at 6.
Yeah. Keep Georgia at 6.
You're
That's kind of a wait-and-see deal, too.
Jacob Eason is going to be the man in the SEC.
I think so.
In the East, because the West, Ole Miss is still going to have Shea Patterson after Chad Kelly's gone. So they're still going to have to worry about us. But they also have Nick Chubb.
Right.
They have Sony Michel. These running backs in Georgia are monsters. And not only that, they got Evander Holyfield's son, Elijah Holyfield, as a backup running back. He's just buried on their deep running back depth chart.
Well, he can't throw punches either, though. All he can do is run over you, and we'll see how that turns out.
If he can throw a shoulder, that's all that matters.
But wasn't Georgia supposed to be hyped to be something good last year, and then they ended up collapsing also?
But a lot of that, I think, had to do with their defensive coordinator at the time, Jeremy Pruitt. And, of course, he's gone now. They had a lot of overturn with Mark Richt. Mark Richt was an offensive guy, and their defense is what led them down traditionally, especially over the last 5 or 6 years. But now with Kirby Smart defecting from Alabama, which I do think is going to be the reason Alabama does not repeat as national champions this year, because Kirby Smart was the man. Because Alabama, by far and large, their defense is the best part about that team. Top to bottom, defensive line, linebackers,
So you
secondary.
don't think the genius of Lane Kiffin is what propelled Alabama to their greatness?
Lane Kiffin's hot garbage. He has been hot garbage everywhere he has ever gone.
Well, he was loved in Tennessee, wasn't he?
Until he was run out of town with pitchforks and burning. They ran Lane Kiffin off in record time. But I don't even think it was the people in Rocky Top. That Lane Kiffin ran himself off because he is an abrasive personality. Same thing in Oakland when he was with the Raiders, with Tennessee, at USC. At USC, you have a prime position. You run the western part of the country, outside of Texas and Oklahoma. You should be able to destroy everybody every game. And he butchered that job.
All right, so I want to turn our attention real quick to the preseason ranking for the women's soccer. And the reason I'm doing this is because now Ole Miss is ranked number 22.
Toddy.
So they are ranked this year, especially after what their women's soccer team did last year. Their nemesis, Texas A&M, is number 8. And I think A&M was who put them out last year in the tournament. They actually beat SMU 2-0 on Saturday in Dallas in an exhibition game. Now, that exhibition game had to be postponed from Friday night because of inclement weather down there. But their season starts August 19th as the Lady Rebs are going to host Louisiana Lafayette, which they should dominate that game easily enough, of course. But I'm excited to see what these women do. They're very exciting. The more I went back and watched the highlights of some of their stuff, and they had especially their hype video for this year, starting looking at what they did from last year. I'm excited to see what these young ladies do out there.
They have the talent and the ability to make a push for that championship. But now that the season is approaching, it's time to put up or shut up. That's the cool thing about what we do. We're here to speculate and talk about all these different things and our opinions and whatnot. But for them, they're the ones who have to actually go out and execute, and it's time to do that.
Oh, yeah, and it's easy for us to sit here and hype this and hype that, but you're right. They have to actually put on the shoes, lace them up, get out there and get the mindset going and win these games.
But speaking of the inclement weather that you talked about that postponed the game, I've got a few friends that live down in the Baton Rouge, New Orleans area. The flooding has been horrible down there, and I know that I rip on LSU, and I'm not going to stop ripping on LSU, but I just want the listeners to know that to keep that family and those families in that area of the country kind of in your thoughts, because people are getting rescued from rooftops, having to stay up there. I saw pictures where a family was up there, a father, his 2 sons, and a dog, just waiting for someone to come and save them. So things are hard up there or down there in Louisiana for those families. So we just wanted you guys to know that we're thinking about you.
And if you can give to these causes, I'm sure there'll be plenty of fund lines set up, places where you can go to donate, because these people are going to need a lot after pretty much losing everything. When your stuff gets flooded, that's pretty much it for it.
While we're on women's soccer, shout out to Rafael Souza. who's competing for the bronze medal for Brazil, all-time leading scorer for women's soccer, Ole Miss.
Hey, there you go.
She'll be competing this Friday, 11 a.m., so everybody check her out.
And Raven Saunders, she ended up placing 5th in Rio, I think.
Yeah, 5th.
And that sounds like, well, she didn't medal, but she still placed with her best throw. Her
She was up there
best.
really until right there at the end.
It was a personal best for Raven Saunders, so that's huge. Shout out to Raven. Thank you for representing not only our country, but our university that we all love and our listeners love.
That's right, Sam Kendricks.
Yeah, Sam. He taught me how to pole vault and didn't do a very good job, but he's a great pole vaulter. It's funny because back when he was like teaching us, we did a pole vault clinic. Him and his dad run one.
And where was that at? Where was he teaching you at?
Oxford High School. Back in high school, I tried the pole vault, got injured a couple times. I was like, not for me. But they tried. And anyway, back then it was funny because Sam, he was better than everybody else, but you never thought this guy could go to the Olympics. Because, I mean, what are they doing now? They're doing like 19 feet. Back then, I think he was doing, 14, 15, which is amazing because when he's doing 14 and 15 feet and you're sitting there watching him and you're trying to get over the starter, which I think was like 8 foot, you're like, God, this guy's good. But you wouldn't think Olympics. And once he got to college, he just really just shot off and got awesome. And, man, shout out to Sam. That's awesome.
It is pretty awesome. Guys, we got to take a quick break, send some love to our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to talk about what we mentioned last week, the SEC acquiring the ACC. This is an interesting story, so stay with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Are you struggling to lose weight and keep it off? Are you tired of all the fad diets that get you nowhere except miserable? Cockrell Family Medical Center in Senatobia has just opened their new weight loss clinic. If you are serious about getting healthy and losing weight, then call 662-301-1128 to schedule your appointment. Cockrell Family Medical Center. Your health matters. All right, we are back from break. With me, I'm Chad. This is JC, Miles. We talked last week about SEC acquiring ACC. This was a story that was making its rounds a little bit, and I said we'd mention it this week. Well, I want to preface this by saying, when I mentioned that is obviously it was tongue-in-cheek. All right, because that didn't happen. That is not going to happen.
Right.
If you believe that, just stop.
You're not that. I hope you're not that gullible.
Please don't be that naive and gullible, because that's crazy. But it came from an article on SaturdayDownSouth.com, such an interesting
which is
site.
A fantastic website.
It is. If you haven't checked it out, you should go check it out. But this article is written by Kevin Duffy, and it's awesome stuff, and pretty much the way every fan of every SEC team views all the other conferences in the country, period. It just is. The best part to me of the article was when, as Kevin wrote it, the SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey noted that he had no interest in the vast majority of the ACC's football teams. In it, he says, "These clowns added Pittsburgh and Syracuse a few years ago. Isn't the idea to get better at football? I'm pretty sure Syracuse is in Canada. Traveling to Canada in the fall for a football game? No thanks." But maybe even better, was when he was ACC Commissioner John Swofford explained why the conference decided to throw in the towel on football. "I'm frankly sick of the SEC chants everywhere I go. I get it. You guys are the best. Satire, folks. It's awesome. But not wholly off the mark when it comes to the love and the hate of the SEC. I mean, we hear this everywhere, don't we?" And
right. It doesn't matter what part of the country you go to. Sure, you're going to find more fans of teams that are in that area. If you go up to Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin, you're going to hear about the Big Ten. But you're also going to find SEC fans.
You are. And
if you go to the West Coast, you go to USC territory, Oregon territory, you're going to hear about the Pac-12, but you're also going to hear about SEC football. Same if you're in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas area, you're going to hear the Big 12, but you're going to hear a lot about SEC because the SEC is where the top athletes go to play. I'm not saying that top athletes don't go to other places. I mean, I'm not sorry for the language for all you PC aficionados. But the SEC, it's proven time and time again that when it comes to football, baseball, at times golf, it's the place to go. Granted, I understand that the Pac-12 are the reigning golf champions. I do understand that the SEC is atrocious at basketball for whatever reason, which still, to this day, blows my mind.
It really does.
But when it comes to the money-making sport in college athletics, which is football, it is the SEC on a whole different tier. And then, there's all these other places.
And that's as an overall conference. And I think that's really where the SEC gets its reputation from. Is they're stacked really from, I don't want to say top to bottom, but for most of the teams, you really are. I mean, you can look at the Big 12 and pull out 2 or 3 teams that you can go, okay. Same thing with the ACC. You got, Florida State.
Clemson.
And Clemson.
Cannot sleep on Clemson.
And North Carolina looked like they were doing something last year.
They had a rough opening game, and then they put it together for the next 11. And then, the ACC championship game happened.
Exactly.
But you ran into Clemson, and last year's Clemson team was just phenomenal. And then I'm interested to see how Dabo Swinney, puts that defense back together, because they lost a lot of pieces from that defense last year. But at the same time, I feel like the ACC belongs to Clemson. It's theirs. And someone's really going to have to forcefully remove them, whether that's Florida State or North Carolina. But until someone shows some true opposition, you have to respect what Clemson is and what they are and what they can do.
And, I mean, last year, you won't find this in any other conference. Last year, at one point, we had every team in the West except one ranked at one point. You won't find that in any other conference.
And that's insane when you think about it.
And that's just half of the conference.
Yeah,
as Miles said, that's just the West.
That's right.
Now, granted, the East isn't that great. I mean, they have some good teams, but they're not the SEC West. They're not Ole Miss.
And you get it thrown out there all the time when we hear it. And I think this is where so much hate of the SEC outside of the SEC country comes from, is people are always talking about how great the SEC is. And people who are in the SEC are always bragging. Even every team on here is bragging about how good the SEC is who are in the SEC conference. I mean, you just do, because it is so solid, so stacked. And the prevailing theory is if these SEC teams didn't have to play each other all the time, you'd see more in the college playoff, and a lot of other teams may get left out of it.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
I mean, it's a conference that really, post the success of Miami and Ohio State at the turn of the century, I don't know, it's like 2003, I guess, was that Florida Gators team that won the championship on. The SEC has ruled the roost. I mean, you've got, Florida State got a championship. Ohio State got a championship. But Florida, Alabama, LSU, it's been those 3 teams basically for the last 13 years sitting on top of the mountain looking down on everyone else. And 2 of those 3 SEC schools, as Miles has already stated, are in the West. Like, the SEC West is the single most dominant division of football. Let alone conference, but that's the single most dominant division in all of football, pro or college.
So which conference do you guys think poses the biggest threat to SEC football's reign atop the college football world?
None of the above.
And there you go.
Yeah, I want to say the ACC. I do, just because Clemson, they've shown over the last 2 years especially that they can handle themselves. They didn't roll over and let Bama, kick them to the curb in the national championship game. They brought a fight to that game, and it was a phenomenal national championship game. I want to say the ACC, but I don't feel like football is big in ACC schools. ACC is a basketball conference.
Yes.
That's why I would want to say that it'd be the Pac-12. And I would say the Pac-12 just because the state of California is rich with phenomenal high school football talent. Now, granted, some of this talent goes to the SEC, some goes to the Big 12, some goes to the Big 10. But at the end of the day, there's no reason why teams like Cal, USC, Oregon, Oregon's been around for a minute now as a top-tier program. They could definitely serve as a big threat to the SEC. But the problem is SEC plays the most dominant fashion of defensive football in the nation, and that's why it's hard for other schools. Like when Auburn and Oregon played in the national championship game when Cam Newton was at Auburn, Oregon was lighting everybody up offensively. 50 points here, 60 points there. But when they run into SEC defenses,
it's stonewalls.
They're being held to 20 points.
Exactly. Because they're not used to seeing defenses like that. You're not used to seeing football played like that. They're just fun and gunning it until they meet somebody like that.
Because they're wearing down these other defenses in the Pac-12. Guys that aren't as big, but they are athletic. Well, now you got the SEC defenses, and you've got defensive linemen that are 6'4", 6'5", 285 pounds, but they can run a 4.5 40-yard dash. Now, how are you going to wear these guys down? You can keep it up tempo. These guys are monsters physically. They can get through your line. They can stop your offense. And once you slow down those offenses, they fall apart.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to be interesting this year to see. Now, Ole Miss's schedule this year
is a monster.
It is going to be tough.
Now, the non-conference games are outside of Florida State are soft, in my opinion. But the conference schedule is just so physically demanding. Being in the SEC West, playing all of those teams, and then having the Florida State game, which is a great choice for a non-conference game, because that's kind of been the knock on Ole Miss the last few years, is that they don't schedule tough outside of their conference. And with starting off the season with a top 10 team in Florida State, then going on to having your squash match against Wofford, then you've got the Alabama game, and you got the Georgia game. So Ole Miss is potentially playing 3 top 10 teams in the first 4 games of the season, and that's something that's going to take a physical toll on this team. We got to see how well Ole Miss can come through the season, or through the first quarter of the season, or first third of the season rather, as far as the win-loss record goes, but also injuries. Injuries are what's going to make or break this team.
So Miles, let me ask you this then. Ole Miss, if they are sitting in the East instead of the West, what do they do?
Instead of the West, they would be in the East.
If you just took Ole Miss out of the West, put them in the East, and just take the worst team over in the East and just drop them over the West, because they don't matter.
Right.
And just substitute them, not even one of the better teams in the East.
South Carolina or Missouri, either one. Just toss
either one of those. Just toss them back to the West. What do you think happens?
I think they would win the East.
Hands down.
Every single
Hands
year.
down.
The only question mark would be, well, we don't know about Tennessee. I'd worry more about Florida just because how ridiculous their defense is.
Not to mention, still sore about that butt kicking they handed us last year.
Exactly. And, we don't know about Georgia, Tennessee yet. I'd say it'd help with the injuries even, because we go through that stretch in the season every year where it's like Alabama, and so it seems like every year after that Bama game we're just all beat up.
And we've got Arkansas pretty early in the schedule this year too, which has been different from the last 2 years where we had Arkansas towards the end of the year. Now you've got Arkansas mid-season. That's going to be a make or break game for this team. Alabama fans have been talking about how Ole Miss fans acting like they're, watching my language here, like they're hot stuff. But, Alabama overall, it's a better team than Ole Miss. I mean, I don't mind admitting that. But Ole Miss has beaten them 2 years in a row. Arkansas is not as good as Ole Miss is, but they have beaten Ole Miss 2 years in a row. And 2 years ago in Arkansas, in Fayetteville, they beat the brakes off of Ole Miss.
You're talking about an Ole Miss team that was little plays in very close games that kept them out of going to Atlanta back-to-back years. And
Fourth and 25 away from the SEC championship last year.
And then the year before, it was Laquan breaking his leg right at the 1-inch line. So, I mean, you take away some of those very brutal games and swap them out with some of these guys from the East. And the East, as it is set up right now, the East from 10 years ago, yeah, I don't want to be in the East.
Right.
The East as it's set up now, yeah, I'd take it. I think Ole Miss would win it or, be right there and something else crazy happen. But I think if you substitute some of those games, the Alabamas, the LSUs that are so brutal and beat us up every year, honestly, then I think we would be right there to win the East.
Yeah, because I'd rather see Ole Miss play Alabama in the SEC championship game and lose, and have a chance to go on,
right?
Rather than just say, well, we did have that one loss, even though we beat Bama. We have one loss to somebody else and another loss of some flukish nature, and now we can't even fight them, even though our record's better than anybody's.
Well, that raises the question. Even though the SEC is a 14-team conference, should they break it up like they do basketball, where you don't have the East and the West? It's just the 14 teams, best 2 records at the end of the year face each other in a championship, SEC championship game.
Regardless.
That
and
way,
I don't know why they don't do it that way. I'm sure there's an explanation for it.
I mean, let's say Florida wins the SEC East this year, but they're 9-3. There's no chance that they would have to beat let's say an 11-1 Alabama, that one loss, of course, coming at the hands of Ole Miss, or to a 10-2 Ole Miss or an 11-1 Ole Miss. Like that 9-3 Florida team doesn't really have a chance, and should that 9-3 Florida team beat the better team from the West, then you're looking at the SEC potentially not even being represented in the college football playoff.
Exactly. And I think they need to rectify that. There's still a lot of things incorrect. To me, that's always been one of them. I've never seen the benefit, and you even see it in the pros in the NFL with some of their playoff scenarios that they have. But it's the same garbage. If you have the 2 best records in your division, then you should be playing each other at the end of the day for the championship in that division.
Or in your conference as it pertains to college football.
Exactly, in your conference when it pertains to college football.
We have some breaking news live here on air.
Great sound effects. Don't have to add those in.
Ole Miss alum Brittany Reese takes silver in the long jump.
Nice.
Yeah!
Good job.
Hotty toddy.
There you go. That's always good news to have. That was a nice Olympic update.
Ole Miss getting medals, man.
That's it.
And that's Ole Miss sent it's like 8 athletes, current and former, combination to the Olympics. We got 2 medals out of it.
That's good. I mean,
hey, for such a small sample size to turn that into 2 medals, that's something to be proud of.
6 of them coming out of track and field. So
that's good stuff. That's good to hear. All right, guys, we got to take another break. One more before we come back, and when we do come back, we've got a fun little segment we're going to do. And we're going to do this every single week because I'm going to tell you, I've been posting this on Facebook about our fan rants. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that a little bit, and we're going to get into some juicy little fan rants, and then we're going to get into our verbal smackdown part of this.
We will lay the smackers down.
You can smell what we're cooking when we come back from break. Are you struggling to lose weight and keep it off? Are you tired of all the fad diets that get you nowhere except miserable? Cockrell Family Medical Center in Senatobia has just opened their new weight loss clinic. If you are serious about getting healthy and losing weight, then call 662-301-1128 to schedule your appointment. Cockrell Family Medical Center. Your health matters. All right, guys, we are back. I'm your host, Chad. I'm with JC and Miles, and we're here in the last segment of the show. We're going to do something a little bit different, and I say a little bit different because we're going to do this every single week from now on, and this should only get better, but this right here is going to be our Fins Up Smackdown segment. That's what we're going to call this. But before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to give the fans a chance to rant. We've been posting this out there. It's really simple. All you have to do is record it on your phone, however you want to do it, and you can send us to it at rant@finsuppodcast.com, or if you want to, you can even text it to us at 662-612-0703. That's our line here at Fins Up Podcast. So you can do it either way. We've got a couple we want to share with you guys already. And if there's a couple more that happens between now and the time this podcast airs, I might even include those by Friday. But we got 2 juicy ones in, and guess what? They're not from Ole Miss fans. One's from an Alabama fan, and one is from an Arkansas fan.
Atrocious opinions.
I tell you what, this is terrible. The fact that these guys are already weighing in.
Before the Ole Miss fans, guys.
Ole Miss fans are doing it. What's wrong with you guys?
Where are you at?
You got to get involved and get excited about this. It's crazy. But I want you guys to hear this crap. You can hear this, then you can tell me what you think about it. And I'll give you guys a chance to respond to all that. All right, so here it is.
Play the smackdown.
If I offend you, you know, I'm not apologizing for it. If you get offended, then that's life.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you. I double dare you.
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
I'll explain, and I'll use small words that you'll be sure to understand.
I don't like your jerk-off name. I don't like your jerk-off face. I don't like your jerk-off behavior. And I don't like you, jerk-off.
Our first fan rant that we've got in today is going to be from a fan called Big Mike. But I'm going to tell you something. He is not a fan of Ole Miss. This guy is straight from Bama country. Take a listen.
So, Big Mike, what do you think about Ole Miss this year?
Ole Miss, man. I don't know, buddy. I think they're under investigation by the NCAA for paying their players last year. I don't know how I think Kelly's going to do this year, quarterback. Not so sure about him. I know they think they're pretty hot-headed because they beat Alabama a couple years in a row. Then lost to Memphis last year. And not lost, got their ass whooped by Memphis. I don't know, man. I know they got a tough schedule this year, but I guess we'll see. Depends on what happens to them. But I know one thing, roll tide, baby.
Our next fan rant is from a fan named Neil, and I'm not going to tell you where Neil is from. You're going to know immediately once this rant starts. Here it is.
Woo! Pixie! Ole Miss Rebels coming to town October 15th, rolling into Arkansas Stadium. When has our Ole Miss Rebels ever been able to beat a hog? Never, baby. You coming into town, we're going to beat you to death this year just like we did last year. Ole Miss Rebels. Drink some more hotties toddies, baby, because you dreaming in dreamland if you think you can beat the old hogs, baby. Woo! Pixie!
There you go. Those were the 2 rants that we've got in that just came in last night, and one of them came in tonight. What do you guys think? JC, go ahead. Tell me what you think.
All right, Big Mike, the big Bama fan. You asked the question. You said you're unsure about what Chad Kelly is gonna do. You're unsure about Swag Kelly. Well, let me explain something to you, Mike. Chad Kelly's been at Ole Miss one season, and he already owns several Ole Miss passing records. You might have heard of this one guy. What's his name? Oh, Eli Manning. Might I mention, has 2 Super Bowl rings. He had the school records before. Chad Kelly is beating his stats in a singular season. Granted, yeah, he had Laquan Treadwell. But I got some bad news for you, Mikey boy. Chad Kelly now has 6 legitimate weapons at just wide receiver. That's not even counting Evan Ingram at the tight end position. Now we've got bigger running backs in the backfield. Alabama, that's your beloved Roll Tide. Let me explain something. When it comes down to it, down to the nitty-gritty, Ole Miss, if this were a wrestling match, a boxing match, a UFC fight, whatever, Ole Miss would have their hand raised when it's all said and done. Again, 3rd year in a row.
So you're saying you disagree with him?
Just a little bit.
Good job. Miles, what do you think about what we just heard?
Oh, man, I haven't even stretched yet. No. I'm sick and tired of these fans galloping around on their moral high horses. It's so obnoxious. Like, every school does it. We know this by now. Like, they're not getting benefits. but they are. And the things we found out about Ole Miss so far are honestly elementary. We're talking about a rental car for a couple months. We're talking about $800 in his stepdad's account. That's what we know right now. And some lodging a night or two at a hotel. Are you saying that's comparable to Will Redmond receiving $2,000 discount on a car?
Ooh.
Or are we talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars being bidded on Cam Newton? You talking about the school, Alabama, that just got in trouble and had to fire an assistant coach for giving away impermissible benefits?
Dang.
Yeah.
So, that's the pot calling the kettle black.
It happens other places than just Oxford, Mississippi. And what we know so far, which we haven't got all the facts yet, let's wait and see. But what we know so far is not comparable to some of the things we've seen in the last 5 years.
And Mike, I know I kind of went ham on you a little bit there, but you did bring up a good point. Ole Miss has lost games that they shouldn't lose. Like the Memphis game last year. Should not have been a loss. The Arkansas game should not have been a loss. And Neil, don't worry. Haven't forgotten about you, buddy. I'm going to get to you in a second. But this Ole Miss team this year, granted we lost a lot at the linebacker. We addressed that last week. The linebackers core really being the weakest position on the team. But I feel like this offense is similar to what the Cowboys are building in the NFL. Their defense, the defense has traditionally carried Ole Miss, especially since Hugh Freeze has gotten there. But this offense is a high-powered juggernaut, and they are ready to blow up on the entire country. So games like the Memphis game from last year, which we will redeem this year, that's not happening again. Arkansas in the middle of the season, that's not happening again. So Neil, since I have your attention with this Arkansas thing, you brag about there being 2 wins against Ole Miss in the last 2 years. But I need to remind you, your 2 best running backs, they're out of here. Your quarterback, out of here. Your best tight end, the one who, on some miraculous backwards lateral to your best running back, in a miraculous run for 25 yards, they're both out of here. Arkansas doesn't have a chance. Not one. At the end of the day, Ole Miss will pull a Tito Ortiz. You guys remember Tito Ortiz from UFC?
Absolutely.
You remember what his post-fight celebration was? He took out the shovel, he dug up the dirt, he flung it over his shoulder, he put his opponent in the ground, and he buried him.
So you're saying there's only really one way they're going to make hogs squeal in Arkansas this year, right?
And that's when they get butchered.
There you go. Okay, wow.
And speaking of our Kansas, as far as the, woo pig suey goes, you'll be woo pig suing all the way to the Meineke Car Care Bowl or the Liberty Bowl in Memphis again. I hope you enjoy that 7-5 that you've received for the past 2 or 3 years.
Well, nice. Was it my turn? Do I get a
go for it?
Did I get a?
This is all you, buddy.
I'm going to take a little bit different route. My SmackDown is directed towards the fans. Now, I hear you talking. I hear you talking on Facebook. I hear you talking on Twitter. I hear you saying you're going to support your teams. But what I don't hear you doing is calling in and really letting your voice be heard when it matters. It's easy to go on the forum and type in a few words and say that and have your mommy spell correct it for you and whatever else she's going to do. But what's not easy is to hit that little record button on your phone, pick it up, and actually let your voice be heard. Now, if you're for Ole Miss, then you should be out here phoning in. You ought to be talking about it. Because believe me, when we meet up in person and we're talking, you have no problem venting whatever you say. And the same thing goes for all these other opponent schools. I hear them all the time. I've got friends who are opponents of Ole Miss, and they have no problem letting me know. So here's your chance. Here's your chance to let the whole SEC nation know. Here's your opportunity to get out of your shell, to let your wife take your diapers off, put it on your big boy pants, hit that record button on the phone, say what you actually got to say, and send it to us. Do that. Try it. We want to hear what you got to say. You can like it. Yeah, you don't have to like it. You just want to tune out, tune in, or shut the hell up. That's our SmackDown talk for today.
So Neil, Big Mike, I want to thank you I know that I ripped you a new sphincter. It might be slightly loose now. But thank you for having the testicular fortitude to send us your rants, to tell us how you feel about the situation. You know, next time, if you want to hype up your own school, talk about them. You know, you don't have to come straight for the Ole Miss hate, which I do appreciate, because that lets me know you're worried.
And we hate you back.
Even though you want to play it off, that's fine. But I understand that Ole Miss's football team keeps you up at night. But thank you for letting your voice be heard. And other Ole Miss fans, don't let these guys come onto your show. This isn't our show. This is your show. This is for the Ole Miss fans.
Because we're fans too. Make no mistake. This is why we do this.
Don't let these guys come onto your show and troll your team. Stand up. Have a backbone. Fire back at these guys. We want to hear from you.
And let's see if we do. I'm excited to see what kind of response we get. If anybody's going to be able to dial it up, dial it in, and say, hey, we got the message, and this is what we think about it. Because I know you're out there, because we hear it every single Saturday when we pop up Facebook after a game, or before a game, or during a game, and we see all the trash talk going on then to your couple of friends who actually pay attention to your news feed. Well, now here's your opportunity to tell it to a much bigger audience than that. So let's hear it. Let's see what you got to say. Talk that trash. And if you don't like Ole Miss, and you're like those two guys who are calling in and leaving that stuff, hey, we want to hear it too. We're not scared. We're big boys. We can take it. All right. The next thing I want to talk about is the Rebels. They just had their Meet the Rebels Day. And that was Saturday, this past Saturday, August 13th. Now, they had a record turnout for their Meet the Rebels Day, which is pretty awesome. That was, of course, held at the Manning Center.
Right.
And they had almost 7,000 fans turn out.
Way to show your support, guys.
I think so, too. And I'm surprised it was that few, honestly. When you think about how big the Rebel Nation is around here, I'm really surprised it was. It wasn't more than
growing.
That.
You know?
It is, and that's kind of the thing you take away from that, because if they set a record this year that they have another great season this year, like we fully expect to happen, then I think that experience is only going in the way that the leadership over at Ole Miss, how it's going from the top to the bottom, I think is what's setting the standard for that.
And let's be honest, bandwagon fans are a thing.
Oh, of course they are.
They're legitimate.
We see it all the time.
And so what it translates to, the more games you win, the more fans you're going to have.
So win. Build your fandom.
And that's how they are having these record turns out. That's why they expanded Vaught Hemingway Stadium to put more people in seats, because these people want to be there. They want to lock the vault to start the game. They want to do the hotty toddy chant. They want to see that Landshark defense.
And the Grove is the place to be on a Saturday.
Saturday afternoon, there is no place in this country, outside maybe Austin, Texas, like the Grove.
That'd be the only other place.
That's 1 and 2. If there's two places I want to be on a Saturday, I either want to be at Oxford, Mississippi, in the Grove, or I want to be in Austin, Texas, at Darrell K. Royal Stadium.
Absolutely. So I'm excited. So you should be excited too. Next year, Meet the Rebels. Show up. Let's shatter this record. I think everybody should, because here you get to meet the team. If you bring your kids out, there's all kinds of kids games you can play. There's great food. You get autographs. Have some awesome giveaways. It's a total fan experience, and I think that's only going to grow, and I think it's better for the community. I think it's really better for the Ole Miss fans to do that. So.
I had a buddy that was at Meet the Rebels, and he was in the autograph line, and he was there for several hours and had to leave because he just couldn't wait any longer. He was
lines were that long.
It was that long, is what he told me, and I think that's a testament. Like you were talking about bandwagon, but I think it's a testament to how far the program has come. That we even have bandwagon fans. That's a cool thing to me. And so, man, hotty toddy, 7,000, that's amazing.
All right, well, guys, we've got to wrap this show up. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. Spread the word at Fins Up Podcast. Share the love. We want to really build this thing up and bring in the fandom, because that's really what we're about. We're fans. We want you to be fans. And
we're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram.
So
we're on the internet.
Us.
Let's go.
And
Let's do this.
Follow us and find us. One more thing I wanted to hit on. We were waiting on Mississippi State to come aboard, but unfortunately we're out of time for the evening, so we couldn't get them in. Our apologies, maybe next time. And until then, Fins Up, hotty toddy, we're out.